who is, thanks, Andres. Okay, so if you are a student, the request is that you actually put your camera on for the length of the class today. If things become difficult because of the actual bandwidth, then we will reconsider that. But if you are watching and you're a student, please turn your camera on. Partly it makes so that the speaker knows that they're not speaking into the void. A few things, and then if there are questions people have. The first being that today's attendance, we'll take attendance at the end of this lecture and discussion. And the way we'll take attendance, we'll tell you when, which is to actually post here in the comments at the end of the lecture. So in the chat, so everyone will need to do that before signing off, but that'll be at probably 7:30 or 7:45. Okay. A few things to just mention tonight is that I wanted to remind you all about that next week we're actually going to be in person again, and we'll be watching your Cinetracts. So that if you have not posted a Cinetract by now, you need to do it immediately, like by the end of today, so that it can be included, because we're starting to edit them. So please do that today. And then the other thing is that, and I'm now going to share my screen, which is that for many of you, you did in fact post your 500-word annotation actually on UB Box. And the requirement for where you are supposed to be, let me just get this going. So here's the screen share. Let me see where it is. Okay. This is the screen share I am giving you right now, which is that this is actually, I'm on UB Learns, and you need to upload your Cinetract itself here at the UB Box folder, but you then need to come back to this, which is the assignment, okay? And the assignment here is where you are meant to be actually posting your 500-word annotation for your Cinetract. Okay, so many of you have done this, right? But many of you haven't, and many of you who have not posted your annotation have in fact actually posted one on UB Box. So if you are someone who's done that, or you're still waiting you are still waiting to submit or finish your Cinetract, once you actually upload the video, you need to come to this place and post the caption, okay? And the other thing you need to post here is the link to your video. So either that can be a link to its upload on YouTube or a link to its location on UB Box. And the reason it's important that you do this is where all of you are assigned next week, not to do any reading for the first time. Your assignment in preparation for next Monday is to go to this blog, and you'll see it. It's on here. So here it is, right? And this is where you're going to go. And you're going to read and watch at least 5 of your classmates' posts and click on the links that are in the posts to watch their videos. And then your question is going to be based on, you're going to post in this second blog where your questions for your classmate, right? So here we have it. It's down here, and we'll make sure that link is there. Oh, actually, it's not there. So we'll make that link right now and make sure there's a Monday question there for you. Let me see, maybe it's here. It's not, but we'll make sure that that's there. But that's the assignment. Okay, is that clear? Even though now technically it may be confusing. Any questions based on that? No? Okay. Are there other questions that folks have? I'll give you a second just to ask if that was unclear about the Synatract assignment, right? That your annotation needs to go into this blog right here, the Synatract assignment, okay? So if you have it up on UBBox, it needs to get copied and pasted in here, okay? Yep. I see one nodding head. Thank you for nodding your head, John. Okay, then the other thing is just to remind people that I'm asking you to turn on your camera for attendance. Great. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Are there any questions that people have about either the assignments or I said last week about them making up that you should, for missing assignments, that you should submit them Monday questions, Friday responses, even if they're late. You'll just get half a point off for them for being late, but you should still post them so that you get the rest of the credit. So if it's a day late, it's 0.5 off, but it's also but if it's 3 weeks late, it's still the same amount off. Okay. So you're not being penalized for the fact that you didn't do the first week's assignments. Just do them now. Okay. Those can make a big difference in terms of your grade. Any other?
I just want to say quickly that I think you should repeat the today's attendance policy.
Yeah, I will. I was going to do that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, that's great about the plasma things. Again, we're going to be in person next week. So to be watching in 112. But I just wanted to also say 2 things about today's lecture, which is that we will be taking attendance after the Q&A. So, and I'm asking you as a student, if you are a student, to keep your camera on, please. But we'll be taking an attendance at the end of the talk and Q&A, and that'll be through the comment section. But it'll be a prompt at a certain moment when we'll be asking you to make a comment. I do also want to say that we encourage you to make comments during the lecture, but that Andras and I will be moderating the chat after the talk, right? So feel free to make comments or questions during the talk, but Akil will be focused, and we won't, unless there's something like technical, we won't be interrupting him. Right, Akil? Is that good? Yeah. Yeah. So, but I really want to. The other thing to say is that there's a chapter that Akil wrote that I will be posting as a recommended reading that will flesh out some of what and give some more framework for some of the ideas that he's presenting today. So for those of you to follow up, and especially for those of you who, that can inform your Friday response this week. But it'll be there, especially for those of you who want to write about Akil's research and his presentation for your final paper. Okay, so it's like the additional footnotes. So he's not actually going to be talking about esports and the color line, which is the article that you read. That'll just give you a sense of some of the other sorts of scholarship that he's doing. This is more closely connected to the research that he's been doing as part of his dissertation. Okay, that clear? So you get to read more, as that's what's so exciting. You didn't get enough. There's more, and there'll be more to come over the years to follow. So that's part of the excitement. But really, you have 2 whole minutes. That's all only belongs to you as students. So if you have any comments or thoughts, please unmute yourself and ask if there's a question for me or for Andras as we move into the last month of okay. Anything extra we need to? Yes, the attendance, Simon, the attendance today is that at the end of the talk and Q&A, you'll be signing in to chat. So at that time, you'll be signing in, okay? And for the final paper, I spoke about it some last week, right? But the idea is that so you've been writing 500 words every week in response to a single speaker. The final paper is 1,250 words. And there are a few ways you can do this. You can choose to identify a theme across different speakers this semester, or you can choose a single speaker or 2 speakers to write more in depth about. And the idea being that it's a paper, not a blog response, so that you are making an argument in the sense of you have a point to make about something about the relations between the artists or the scholars, some of the content. You can talk about presentation styles or questions about what these examples of artists and scholars raise. But that's what the final paper is, a prompt to dig deeper into either 1 or 2 or a theme, and to make an argument about or have a thesis about something you learned from plasma this semester. The one thing that I made clear last week was that you can't plagiarize yourself. So you can start with some of the ideas in your blog post, but you are not, you have to write new sentences. Right, so you could conceivably throw your response into ChatGPT and generate another paper based on that. But I highly discourage you from that because it will plagiarize you. So don't do that. But if you can do it and disguise it and edit it enough so that there's something novel there about that can draw together a few things, go for it. But the idea is that you are writing about one of the speakers or 2 of the speakers, a theme, an approach, an aspect of media. Is that clear? Does that help, Nazir? Yes? No? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. So the other thing to say about that is that I have office hours tomorrow from 3 to 5 on Zoom. And Andras had office hours on Monday. And he will again next Monday, as will I, next Tuesday. But you can send an email if you want to try out your idea, or and I'll put some more detail what I just said onto UB Learns. Okay. Yep. Okay, great. Okay, so it is actually 6:17. So for those of you just joining us, this is Plasma 2023, which is a course and lecture series sponsored by the Department of Media Study at the University of Buffalo. And this is this class and series is also supported by the Office of the Dean of Arts and Sciences, the College of Arts and Sciences at University of Buffalo, by UB Art Galleries, as well as Squeaky Wheel Media Art Center, and the Humanities Institute of University of Buffalo. This series of speakers, which is presentation, PLASMA stands for presentations, lectures, and screenings by media artists or about media art. This series was curated by me and by Sylvie Fortin, who's a curator for the UB Art Galleries, as well as Ekram Serdar, who is the curator for Squeaky Wheel. And our speaker from 2 weeks ago has an exhibition. Hiba Ali is their exhibition is up on at Squeaky Wheel in person. I'll put information in the chat about that. As is the exhibition curated by Sylvie Fortin, I Don't Know You Like That, The Bodywork of Hospitality, which is an art exhibition that's on display through May at the UB Art Gallery at the Center for Arts on the North Campus, as well as 1 Martha Jackson Place at the Anderson Gallery. But tonight, I'm especially excited to introduce Akil Fletcher, who will be speaking tonight. Akil is, hold on one second as my notes go away. Akil is finishing his dissertation presently this morning, I imagine, even. Let me just, sorry, one thing. Okay, so Akil Fletcher is an award-winning researcher and PhD candidate in the Anthropology department at University of California Irvine. His work focuses on understanding how Black gamers experience and utilize games and online platforms to create community. Currently, his project is funded by the National Science Foundation and seeks to understand how online Black communities use these platforms to form selfhood and relationships within games that traditionally have not been seen as Black spaces. His current research engages with the games Final Fantasy 14 and League of Legends. Fletcher's paper, Esports and the Color Line, Skill, Labor, and the Exclusion of Players, was published in the proceedings of the 53rd Hawaii International Conference on System Sciences in 2020. The title of his dissertation is Gaming Blackness, an exploration of Black gaming communities and practices. Akil has a BA in anthropology from the City College of New York, and he is currently finishing up his PhD in anthropology at the University of California, Irvine. In addition to the article I just mentioned, a related book chapter, which will be sending out to the students, but can also be contacted for the citation for is Akil published a chapter entitled Black Gamers Refuge, Finding Community Within the Magic Circle of Whiteness. And this is published in the Rutledge Companion to Media Anthropology in 2022. So I'm very excited to introduce a scholar who is trained as an anthropologist, but who is a media anthropologist, not a media studies scholar. This is someone who does field work within the context of online communities, in addition to a lot of other approaches to media, but I'll let him talk about that. So I'm thrilled to have invite Akil Fletcher to speak with students and UB community and whoever else got the invite tonight. So thank you. No further ado, Akil.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Paige. Hi, everyone. I'm not going to reiterate, but my name is Akil. I'm here at the Anthropology Department at UCI. I'm super excited to be talking to everybody tonight. Unfortunately, I'm not there in person, so here I am at 3 p.m. on the West Coast, getting ready to speak to all of you. Unfortunately, because I'm not there, it means that we can't have a back and forth and have questions be thrown out mid conversation. So it looks like I'll just be talking at you for 45 minutes. I'll try to even make it shorter so we have more time for questions. And then I'm happy to engage any of the questions that you might have had from the readings or from the upcoming discussion that I'm going to go through now. It's kind of a slip of a wrist that I sent the esports article instead of the Black Gamers Refuge, which is will be the same name as the presentation going out forward. But I will do my best, not to bore you, and I will just go ahead and get started. Once I learn how to screen share, all right, let's do this. This should be it. First, do I sound okay, everyone? Beautiful. Secondly, are we all seeing what I'm seeing? More beautiful. Okay, so today's presentation is going to be Gaming Blackness, Finding Community Within the Magic Circle of Whiteness. And I understand that this is also part of a class, so I wanted to bring in a bit of the ethnographic research so you can see the ways that anthropologists or individuals who conduct ethnography sort of engage with spaces, digital and virtual spaces. A lot of the research that you might have read or see around game studies or video games in and of themselves are typically analytical or some either of the games themselves or the narrative based, but I don't necessarily research the games themselves, but I research what people do with the games. And like Paige said, that is, sorry.
We are having a moment where the students are not seeing the screen.
Okay.
So hold on one second. Okay.
Shall I stop sharing and try again?
Just 1 second. Andres, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and to me, I can see the screen, share screen. I've
Do you want to stop screen sharing for 1 second?
Of course.
I hope that's great. Okay, so now what we need to do.
No one can even see me. That's crazy.
It says focus mode. Is it on focus mode?
Okay, I've got it off focus. Okay.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so now let's see if you can share your screen, Akil.
Sure. Am I a person now? Can people see me?
You are a person, I believe that.
Yes.
Yes. You're officially.
Thanks for the comments.
Yeah, thank you for that. That would have been,
Awful.
person.
Yeah.
Anyway, here's my face. I'm a person, and I will be screen sharing now. Now, do we all see the PowerPoint?
Yes, it looks like.
Students, yes, yes.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, we have thumbs up. Terrific. Okay, take it away. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I'm happy to do it. Either way. So, as I was saying, I'm largely going to be speaking about Black game communities today. But specifically, I'm going to be talking about two sort of theories that I worked through in the chapter that is will be sent out to all of you called the Magic Circle of Whiteness and the Black Spoil Sport. Essentially two theories that look to explain sort of gaming space as it is viewed and played through by Black individuals, and then the sort of response and sort of fugitive activities that is taken on by Black players in their game space. But before I get to all of that, to begin, I'll have to talk about some of the influences that sort of led to these creations and the sort of question that has been birthed out of my work, or that my work has sort of been working around, and that is, how does it feel to be a problem online? Let's see, how does that work? Now, you've more than likely read the article, and if you didn't, I'm not going to snitch on you. It's okay. But for those of you that think this sounds familiar and are probably aware that this question is a form or an expansion on the timeless question posed by the scholar W.B. Du Bois of how does it feel to be a problem, where in his work, The Souls of Black Folk, Du Bois famously notes that there is a point in which every Black American comes to realize, first, that they are Black, and second, that they are a problem. My question simply takes his and expands it to the virtual and the digital, as Du Bois writes, the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil, gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelations of the other world. In what he calls double consciousness, where one feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, the two-ness that Du Bois seeks to explain is a sort of realization and contradiction to having to exist in a world which was clearly not meant for you, you being Black individuals in this case, where you must literally see yourself in two through your own eyes and then through the eyes of white culture. However, this two-ness is not just limited to the physical, but rather you can experience this two-ness at work or on campus, and plenty of these individuals feel this sort of two-ness in online spaces and games, as many of us has probably heard the argument that not everyone is a gamer, or the ideas of what falls along a gamer may not necessarily be copacetic or identifying with Black individuals. And this is something that's sort of made clear with events like Gamergate, if you are familiar with the huge sort of but the huge hate raid that was taken on that targeted mostly women and people of color, and basically any individual that sort of sits outside this identity of white masculinity. And when you look at this, or you see the identity of individuals not being able to acknowledge or be seen as a gamer, this two-ness then sort of inspires and becomes more relevant, as the project that I look at, many of my Black interlocutors expressed that they themselves felt like they were on the outside of gaming culture or behind some sort of digital veil, experiencing a literal sort of digital double consciousness where they had to judge their Blackness directly against the identity of that of a gamer, often wondering if it was even if the two were even compatible. Now, plenty of individuals have fought for the right for this gamer identity, and this sort of realization then goes on to influence their behavior, resulting in a sort of formation of new spaces, new gaming tactics, and new forms of resistance that are carried out in everyday play as they look to reconcile or deal with the reality that they will experience racism online because they do not fit this gamer identity, or the individuals who are looking to take and claim this sort of gamer identity. So my project then has to understand both the racial dynamics of the space and the players that wrap around this idea of, I have to sort of wrap my mind around this idea of Black gamers playing in what is largely a sort of white gaming space. And that is where I begin to develop the Magic Circle of Whiteness and the Black Spoil Sport, as they look to identify or explain the environment that Black individuals are seen within. Now, the two big individuals that influence this work is obviously Du Bois, which was the first one that you would have read the other one. But the second is actually a historian by the name of Johann Huizinga, who in 1938 in his work Homo Ludens, introduced the idea of the magic circle. The magic circle is essentially an imaginary world of agreement whereby all players, by agreeing on a set of rules, create a sort of social bubble where a game essentially reigns supreme, and everyone who breaks the bubble is essentially what Huizinga calls the spoil sport. It's a very popular concept within game studies, as it comes as a way to sort of identify the differing mental spaces that you enter when playing a game versus when you are not playing a game. Huizinga, for instance, mostly is referring to games like chess, where if you and I are playing chess, you can't just move your horse and take my king randomly. You have to come to agreed upon, we have to have an agreement that the horse will make the L shape and that we are playing with a set of rules, because if you don't play with those rules, then we are no longer playing chess. You are breaking the magic circle, and there is no longer any sort of agreement or identification that we are playing chess in the first place. Now, this idea, however, has also been heavily criticized within game studies, because the way it is often used, or the way that Huizinga describes it, is that it's often games are sort of viewed as a vacuum where everything inside the game is just a game and everything outside of the game doesn't matter. And this has obviously been criticized because games bleed into the physical world bleeds into games. And you can see this very often in terms of online gaming, where plenty of things from our pop culture will bleed into games like Fortnite, where you can enter concerts and have fun in other ways, or you will be kamehamehaing individuals and doing other things like that, and vice versa, where games influence the physical world, where many of you might have seen people dressed up as Fortnite characters, which I still can't name any of them for you, for Halloween or any of these other spaces, right? So you have scholars like Amanda Phillips, Bonnie Nardi, other individuals who sort of take into the work and use this to understand that the realm of games by no means is specifically closed, but it is still sort of its unique space. Games do create culture. The difference of when you are playing a video game and when you are not playing a video game. For example, when you are playing Halo when you are not, it's Halo when it's not Elden Ring. However, because video games, like I said, are online, they exist in a state of intermediality where through their connections with the internet, they connect with multiple forms of social media, streaming websites, all the communication apps, and games expand largely beyond just the games themselves. So a portion of understanding for myself, applying the magic circle within this theorization is understanding that the magic circle isn't a vacuum. You have multiple holes. It is porous. Information goes in, information goes out. So then it then becomes a need to understand online gaming spaces as a space that contains its own culture, but is then influencing and being influenced by outside space. It is filtering in and out of itself like a cell. Thus, the boundaries of this theorization need to expand to include these multiple forms of media and digital communities which exist in the media, which are also creating their own game community, their own sort of culture, and reframing what it is in itself to even be a game. Whoop, too far back. Now, most notably, some of the examples of this that you can sort of see this cultural blend or this reformation of what is game and gameplay in of itself is in some of the sort of racism or racist attacks that happen in online space. You can see the individual T-Pain on the screen, real name Fahim Rashid Najim, was an individual who, if you haven't heard all of the music by TPC, is also a streamer who plays plenty of games on a stream, and one of those games being Call of Duty, where this individual was harassed, called the N-word, and all these sort of aspects within the game. However, but the interesting thing about that interaction was that the fact that these individuals weren't just finding their fun or their play from Call of Duty itself. They weren't just like, hey, we're just going to shoot and kill each other, but they were finding their enjoyment and play within the sort of racist attacks that they were carrying out. Their fun came from berating T-Pain with the N-word, and you can sort of see this as a form of play in and of itself, creating a game within a game using the sort of forces of racism, something that you can see in other attacks, like with Terrence Miller, during the 2016 Hearthstone competition, or even some of the racist remarks and chat that goes back and forth with individuals like Sonic Fox, if you're more familiar with the fighting game community and aspects of themselves, where the game is no longer just a game, but is also a part of this sort of social contract that individuals use to enhance or to find new aspects of the games themselves. If we are talking about things like virtual worlds, it might be easier to understand or consider the fact that when you play an MMORPG or you go into a virtual world, you don't just have to fight the demon king at the end of the world, but you can sit down and fish for 2 hours, right? Virtual worlds and virtual spaces and games, by extension, are spaces where you can do more than just play. And for you can find your fun in all of these other aspects. And unfortunately, many of these individuals are finding their fun and play in racism. Now, it is within this combination then of Du Bois of understanding this sort of double consciousness of seeing yourself both as a Black individual and a gamer, and within Huizinga's magic circle, that I begin to define the magic circle of whiteness. Here we go. For the anime fans, this is actually the circle from Cardcap to Sakura. I'm a big anime fan. I like anime. And I'm happy to talk about that later as well. Here we go. So simply put, I define the magic circle of whiteness as a conceptual tool which takes inspiration from both Du Bois and Huizinga to build upon Huizinga's definition of the magic circle by defining online games and its connected media as not just as isolated spaces, but maintained by a set of rules or guidelines, but as spaces dictated and maintained by a sort of set of white cultural logics, where instead of game rules like the ones that you see in chess, I position the parameters of a game, or position it that it may be better understood by the implicit rules of game culture, which are incredibly entangled within a sort of white male, heterosexual male ideology. This is because historically, in the US, video games, both online and offline, have been viewed as the sort of domain of white men seeking to affirm their identities in technological know-how, constructing a form of what the researcher Carly Kosarik calls technomasculinity. And you can see this as 70% of, 70% of the individuals and game developers in the US are white. Most of the human appearing main video game characters are of the same race. That may serve as a problem, but I will continue. It should be fine in a minute. Yeah. So the majority of video game characters are white. The majority of the developers in the US are white. And video games and the US have essentially they have centered whiteness in their creation. And you can see this all the way back from pre-crash, or before they called a gaming crash in 1983, where when you finally did get human characters, almost none of them were individuals of color. And if they were used as tools or NPCs or individuals to enact violence upon. And we can have another conversation about that. But in this case, what then happens is that often people of color are literally playing then in a white man's world, as video games are the technological creations of imagination, and it is everything that's in a game, whether it is conscious or whether they are conscious of their decisions, is put in there on purpose. Now, this, let me know if I'm going too fast, by the way, because I'm just like, let me get through this and then we can chat in any way. But now, of course, you have, things that you have events, like I said, like Gamergate, that sort of hold up this ideology, as well as the consistency of hate raids within sort of BIPOC streams and communities. And
someone did say that you are going a little faster. Slow down a little bit. Thank you.
So you can sort of see this kept up within a lot of the hate raids, a lot of the pushback that gaming companies get anytime they try to do something that is quote unquote PC, or they sort of have an idea, or they try to make any sort of attempt at diversity, which is often met by what is possibly a minority, but they are a very vocal minority. And then you can go on YouTube and watch all these videos about often angry white men complaining that, they're making this game's PC by attempting to tell the stories of Black individuals, Latinx individuals, Asian individuals, queer individuals, that have not typically been represented in video games in the first place. And because video games can work as what Anna Everett called pedagogical racial zones, video games can work as a sort of learning ground for racial behavior and activity, where I'm sure Xbox Live has resulted in a lot of people using the N-word because it's a part of the culture. I typically have like a funny SpongeBob picture of, people using Xbox Live and I'm only racist on Xbox Live. We'll I've avoided the memes today, but we'll continue with that. So with all that being understood, and in terms of the magic circle of whiteness then working as the background or the sort of explanation of video games serving as a largely white heterosexual space in both its gameplay design, its player base, and the sort of characters that they create in games, I then want to talk about two groups of people that I've been interacting with, and some of them you might consider some of these spaces or ideals as failures, but they're essentially spaces that have tried to create safe spaces for Black individuals, in online gaming space. The first space is one that actually no longer exists, and might be why you call it a failure, called Black People Discord. This space was unfortunately overrun by bad actors and white individuals who came to find their pleasure within the space, and it eventually was destroyed from the outside in, from the inside out. And the second space is one that is actually quite popular and going on currently, called Black Girl Gamers, who have been so successful that they've gotten deals with Marvel, and they find all sorts of business deals and spaces that allow them to sort of continue. So to begin, we'll start with Black People Discord, which was a group that I spent quite some time in, that was essentially a space that was created for Black individuals, but they attempted to have essentially a multiracial space that put Black individuals first. It was a space where anybody could come to as long as they understood that Black individuals were essentially coming here for safety, for protection, for community in many of these cases. And it was a wonderful space that was created by an individual I will refer to as Gold in this space. But like I said, unfortunately, it didn't last because they had essentially opened up their barriers and space to anybody who wanted to join at the time. What would happen is that you would have individuals coming in, screaming the N-word, saying, "Why is there a Black people Discord?" People would lose their mind if there was a white people Discord, pretending to be Black in some cases for quite some while. And one of the beauties of ethnographic research is that you spend a very long time with the space, so you can be there long enough for these sort of bad actors to be sniffed out, or to reveal themselves, often to just go on a racist rant and then dip out of the space. In many of these cases, and for this sort of behavior left a lot of Black individuals feeling unsafe, and would sort of start the decline of the group. As I've been called the N-word enough. Not everybody's going to stick around. Not everybody's going to try to work is going to stick around to make the space work, and they would end up leaving the group. The secondary reason, however, is that many of the non-Black individuals who joined the space largely to find their sort of enjoyment or consumption of fun game time through Blackness. In many individuals marking like, hey, I just feel more comfortable around Black individual. Like one Australian individual who joined the space and was like, I had Black friends growing up, so I just wanted to be around Black people. Other individuals who were just curious to see what Black gaming spaces were like, who meant no harm, but were still there in a sense taking up space. And after enough of these individuals joined, you would find that the group would continuously lose members. As one individual would put it, "I don't trust what's going on here," meaning that a lot of Black individuals essentially left because they felt like this was supposed to be a Black space, and they didn't feel safe between all the racist attacks and white individuals coming in to essentially have fun at their expense. And eventually this group would fall apart and then be taken over by the Australian individual that I mentioned before, as he was actually quite helpful within the group and worked to try to keep it a better space. But it just didn't last because of the engagement of improper sort of between the racism and the sort of racial consumption. And this sort of starts to get at the ways in which the magic circle of whiteness sort of starts to explain and work in terms of where Black space is and how it has difficulty surviving in its space, because both, whether or not it is acceptable or unacceptable, there's a way to sort of use Black labor within the space, which some of you might remember from the gaming and the esports chapter. Now, that was sort of the end of like I said, the sort of end of BPD, and we can sort of skip this and then start beginning on discussing the other half of the theory here. So moving from the magic circle of whiteness now over to the Black spoil sport. So as I said before, when Huizinga put out his theorization in that the magic circle of whiteness is what
Oh no, you just froze, Akil. So, oh no. Okay. Okay, so I think he just went off. Okay, I think he's probably
Trying to come back.
logged back in. We'll log back in a second. There he is, back. We can see you and you're moving, but you're muted.
yes.
Now you're not.
The internet decided to
Have a moment.
I personally don't see you. Sorry. I don't know about the others.
Am I a person again, people?
I don't see you right now. So I can't speak.
Yes, I can see you. Do you want to try screen sharing and see if that works?
Sure, let's do that.
Andres, can you see that?
Yes. Okay. Now it works. Okay.
I think we're good.
Perfect.
Okay.
So now, thanks, internet. My brain is now at a flutter, but either way. So now we get to like I said, the sort of secondary half of this twin conception and the Black spoil sport, as when Black individuals play video games or even create space, they're not sitting around going, "Oh man, I hope white people don't ruin my time," or any of the sort of anti-Blackness that example. They don't sit around going, how's the man going to screw us today? They have developed plenty of sort of actions of what Damien Sejoyner or Tina Compt called fugitivity, and these sort of active and passive resistances of the state, not like literally trying to run or hide like a fugitive in many of these cases, but it is the acts of resistance, of everyday maneuveral and circumvention of the state. And while many individuals understand that video games can be a very racist and horrifying space, it hasn't stopped Black individuals from making some really beautiful, wonderful spaces that they can find community, they make friends, they play and form all sorts of beautiful networks. And this sort of action is what I encapsulate as the Black spoil sport. As now I think my children are at the door. Anyway, but so as Huizinga marks, the literal aspects of individuals who don't accept the rules of the magic circle, or individuals who deny the rules of the magic circle, is referred to as spoil sports, who sort of shatter the world of play. If the magic circle of whiteness then acknowledges gaming space as inherently white, individuals who move against this or incapable of moving against this because they are essentially not white, or specifically what works as foil to whiteness in its creation, sort of shatter the idea that gaming in and of itself is obviously an inherently white space because Black individuals are still making room in it. They're still creating all of this wonderful opportunities. So this idea of shattering as resistance, or sort of breaking the perception of gaming as a white space, allows Black individuals to sort of move and create the wonderful spaces that we create. And one of them that I said I would talk about is Black Girl Gamers, who is fantastic. Was started by an individual by the name of Jayan Lopez, and Black Girl Gamers have spread out to be a sort of international sort of Black-facing group that they can essentially work in public to do all the wonderful ideas of enacting change, fighting for diversity, finding jobs for Black individuals within the market, as Black game developers only make up 2% of the workforce. But they ironically have succeeded for very different reasons than Black People Discord, whereas Black People Discord sort of let everybody into the space and and sort of trusted individuals on the internet to want to see, you know, Black people feel comfortable. Black Girl Gamers took the opposite approach and basically barred everyone that wasn't a Black woman from entering their space, in which they then created a very well-functioning society, essentially a community where they were able to build up, support one another, and then work around circumvent many of the sort of racist practices that I have spoken about that take place within the magic circle of whiteness. When interviewing individuals from Black Girl Gamers, they pointed out how important it was for them to sort of have this community, as many of them weren't even turning on their mics to have someone to engage with people online, because when you play online, there's always a physical artifacts that sort of follow you within the game space. If you turn on your mic and somebody was able to recognize that they are a woman or a Black individual, whether or not that be through, you know, the use of Black English or any other sort of you know, vocal identifiers, this would often open individuals up to different types of harassment. Specifically, I'm sure many of us have seen the memes and the videos of where a woman gets onto a mic and now everybody is attempting to ask them out or harassing them or doing all these other things. This often happens doubly for Black women, specifically if they have Brooklyn accents or anything else that is sort of fits the essence or the stereotypical view of Blackness in many of these cases. These individuals then experience heavy misogynoir or the specific discrimination against Black women. And Black Girl Gamers was a sort of space that they can find people to play with, create the identification, the sort of connections that they needed to exist within the spaces, allowing the larger gaming space not to scare them off, in order to make sure that they had a space to be. And moving from within the sort of spaces of Black Girl Gamers, whether or not that be their Facebook or their Twitter or, you know, their Discord, they were able to make these spaces a lot more hospitable for what they wanted to do. And like I was saying before, this has been done to great success. They've had deals with Marvel. They have worked with multiple game companies, and they are by far one of the most successful Black gaming groups that I've had the honor of working with and asking questions about. And I wanted to give them a huge shout out because they do some great work. So go follow them, support them as however you can, and there's some, you know, fantastic stuff there. So we can sort of finish this up and hopefully no more intervention. This little things happen. The magic circle of whiteness then is the sort of triangulation of the industry, the player base, and the games themselves that sort of create this logic or continue this logic of whiteness that can be found not just within gaming, but within the larger US or even Western world. And Black spoil sports then are the fugitive identities that sort of break or circumvent this white gaming logics to survive, to find space, and to create new possibilities within the gaming environment. And with that, I will end it, start taking questions, and say thank you to all of you, because the internet was not great today. But thank you all.
Thank you, Akil. I just put in the chat the link to the webpage for the Black Girl Gamers. So for people to be able to check out that and connections to their platforms. I hope that's the right link, right? But yeah, so thank you for that. And I want to encourage people to raise their hands or unmute yourselves. And Andras and I will be moderating the chat and also reading if there are questions in the chat if you don't want to speak. But if you want to put a question, a burning question for Akil about this talk and the questions about the magic circle of whiteness, or the questions about methodology, or the right of how your research, Akil's research functions in terms of the relationship between these ideas, historical ideas, and how that helps to understand the creation of and the operations of space online, and what it means to be thinking theoretically and critically about spaces of activity and of community, of connection, but also of play online, as a significant site where race and gender are produced, reproduced, taught, enacted, practiced, and where, as you say, Akil, whiteness and anti-Blackness are reproduced, produced, in addition to other forms of practices, right? So, and discourses, ideas. Do you want to unmute yourself, Gabrielle?
Not particularly, no.
Oh, you don't want to read your question? No? I mean, even though, especially since it is
it's more of a statement, so I didn't think it was necessary to like get out here and like, ooh, talk about it. But I appreciate the conversation and the struggle spoken about today. Just, I'm a white woman, so it's not the same thing. But I have taken to my name is already relatively male in general, masculine name, but I have started taking to using Gabe online over my full Gabrielle to avoid. I just find that I'm given more respect in general, whether it's gaming or if it's just online discourse in general media communities. So just more of an observation. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Not at all. No.
You're perfectly fine. And I know I zoomed through that mostly because like I have to be high energy and I'd rather talk to all of you. But your experiences are very real. It's okay. It's okay to acknowledge that, right? Being a woman of any color on gaming and gaming spaces is obviously going to be difficult, and I think it's important to recognize that as I discuss whiteness and Blackness, I'm not specifically speaking about white people. I'm speaking about the construction of whiteness as a sort of theoretical force and station of categorization of who is and is not human, right? So when Blackness and whiteness was constructed essentially by colonial European, Blackness became a sort of way of marking the non-human, the inhuman, who it was okay to enslave. And if you are familiar with the sort of the history of racialization within the U.S., whiteness has been a very funny goalpost marker of many individuals coming from Southern Europe and other things like that who was not originally marked as white, but was, became like they were honorarily pushed into the state of whiteness, largely to often continuously keeping the mark or the benchmark of what Blackness was very specific towards the sort of people who phenotypically look like me. And whiteness doesn't, like the construction of whiteness, or in many of these cases white supremacy, doesn't just harm the Black individuals, but it becomes a sort of weird goalposts and team flag that also harms white people themselves, because it often causes individuals to work against, to be blind to the many things, or the many specific things in whiteness that are, especially among white people, that are very real. Misogyny is a very real thing. The sort of differentiations or the advantages or disadvantages that white women get versus people of color are a very real thing. So I fully understand the hesitation to call it out, but like I said, your experiences are very real. They should be taken seriously, and you're not the only person who does this. It was very common for women that I've spoken to during research to say, like, hey, I play as a guy character, I use male models, or they would do things that did not necessarily give off, like I said, muting your mic, right? So that you couldn't be identified as a woman, to avoid the sort of harassment that happens in gaming spaces that has a really long history of building up around a masculine identity, whether or not it was from the arcade or any of these other spaces that have sort of like marked boyhood, specifically like with video games. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure it's so much harder to have the race thrown on top of that. I mean, I can't even imagine. That was more the point of my statement, was I can't imagine how much harder it would be, also having that second prejudice put against you, because I've already taken myself out of the loop, and I don't even have that, extra impediment.
Of course, it's and I don't like to play race oppression Olympics in a lot of cases, but yeah, it's important to recognize that things are harder for Black women in a lot of cases. So I think there's another one there by Daniel. Daniel, do you want to talk, or should I just read?
Let's see if Daniel, can you unmute yourself and read your question or ask your question?
That's fine. So okay. There are tons of black female streamers. Of course, a lot of this is sort of what Sophia Noble calls algorithmic oppression, in terms of who Twitch and what the algorithm sort of push forward for you to see as the top 10 streamers are mostly white men, and then there's Pokimane. But there are individuals like Jihara, Black Girl Gamers has, their stream events and lots of other things like that. So it also depends on what you consider big. If we're talking about like 1,000 people streams, there are a few, oh my God, I'm forgetting her name. It's like McKay something. But those individuals are not the ones that are popping up on your Twitch feed immediately, unless you've already sort of dived into that content. If you find one Black creator, it then becomes exponentially easier to find another as the algorithm starts to push them on top of you. But if all you've ever watched were white men, then it becomes that much harder to find them, as the internet is very good at creating sort of echo chambers, or sort of keeping your space, keeping it in their space. I'll watch one conservative video and then I'm red pilled for like the next month. As you try to pay attention to it, and it can happen vice versa. But yeah, I would definitely check out some of the people that they highlight, because Black Girl Gamers will push. Like, here's some some dope Black women content creators for you to check out, if that helps, Daniel.
Hi there. I guess I'll just go. And sorry if this question's a bit long-winded, just because it's something pretty personally close to me. I just wanted to ask specifically if you have any observations or interest in the fighting game community. You mentioned Sonic Fox, and I've actually known them personally for going on 5 years. And in my time in the fighting game community, I've learned that while it still has its problematic figures, it's a much more inclusive and safe gaming community than many others may be. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's also a lot smaller and receives much less funding, and I think like public attention, than other more white hetero-dominated esports and gaming spheres. Mm-hmm. I have an older brother who's a commentator for fighting games, and we actually worked on a documentary specifically dissecting culture in the FGC and what the attempted integration of esports has done to the community and how it might have homogenized it a little. And I just want to know if you had any perspective on the fighting game community in particular, like in contrast or comparison to the rest of the gaming sphere.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that when I started doing it was largely within PC gamers. But So the FGC, or the fighting game community, is a longstanding community of individuals who specifically play and compete in fighting games. And it is one of the spaces that has the highest amount of diversity and representation, specifically for Black representation. Sonic Fox being sort of like the big name that has popped out for the last couple of years, as they are great at games like, well, they're actually showing out pretty much in Street Fighter with Jury and things like that. But, Dragon Ball, other 2D, usually fighting games and things like that. And yeah, there's a lot of, so I talk about this a little bit in the sort of esports and the color line article, and that you're right, FGC is nowhere near as well funded. They're not, and that's kind of a sucky thing when this is where all the BIPOC folk are sort of going and showing up, between the wonderful players from Pakistan and the many opportunities for women and female gamers within the space. It is incredibly problematic. So my research was largely looking at PC gamers, because a lot of the work has talked about FGC, or there's a lot of folks doing the sort of esports and FGC scene in a lot of the cases. And yeah, the big point of the esports and the color line article is the sort of usage of Black labor and how it is and is not rewarded in many of these spaces. And there aren't a lot of Black PC esports players, and it's very, very problematic that all the funding is essentially going to games like League of Legends and Dota and StarCraft, but the FGC, while getting sponsors, has a lot more of a precarious sort of structure where you pay your own fee, you're walking in, and I mean, it's great, right? Because it builds community that anybody can compete in things like Evo and other aspects like that, but it offers no security for the players in and of themselves, because once you lose, or you don't have if you're not talented enough in many of these cases, even if you are a great player, you're not going to be financially backed for many of these cases. And in terms of just like discussing the culture, I do have to give the FGC a pat on its back for allowing many of the individuals to come in there. And there's great folks here at UCI like Reginald Gardner, who works specifically more on the FGC community, as well as Javon Gord, who is in an education department. And I may have an article on it that might be worth reading. But even within the FGC, there are issues, right? FGC is specifically around the aspect of women gamers, isn't exactly perfect in a lot of these cases, but it is definitely a move in the right direction. And I think there's a lot that PC esports like League of Legends could learn from FGC culturally, because it just has a different history of where it formed, right? It's more of a grassroots play. You have individuals that are getting around, whether it be arcades and rooms and things like that allow you to build out, and you have more people come, you invite people, things like Friday night fights and Wednesday night fights, excuse me, that build out a community a lot more than playing on just a 5-person team at a school like UCI, and then meeting other players once, sometimes not even physically, to play, beat them, get sponsored, and then move on from there, if that helps or sort of answers the question.
Yeah, that is definitely a discussion I was looking into. Your work just particularly reminded me of when Sonic Fox received the Esports Award for Competitive Player of the Year. And that just kind of opened a lot of people up to, I guess, the existence of the FGC. And there's a lot of backlash, just as, a non-binary gay Black man receiving this award in a category that was dominated by people playing first-person shooters. I remember there was just a lot of flack they received for basically no reason, when by all accounts, they're a genius and a legend at what they do. So I just think just kind of the clash of the means of communities right there is very interesting. So I really love learning more about it. Thank you.
Of course, happy to discuss more. And even there is sort of what I try to get at within terms of the magic circle of whiteness of these communities exist, but even with what is basically the best fighting game player in the world, being a non-binary Black individual, furry individual, there was a backlash. There was a huge roar, and there was a lot of moments of trying to sort of knock that peg back into its hole so it's not visible anymore. But Sonic Fox persevered, and I've never met them personally, but let them know that they're the shit. They are goated, so I'm happy to support. Any other ones?
I'll ask a question. So I have an experience of being the token white kid. I grew up in like the inner city. So it's not what you think it is. So it's actually quite nice. And with that, like, so like racism and everything, like I know like there's like this huge charge and everything behind it. And I'm definitely like, like so behind like the progression of like the upping of all races, honestly, and whatnot. But my experience has been to honestly with that is to not super hyper focus on race, is why I mentioned that. And so I'm noticing there's a lot of hyper focusing on race. And I feel like there's a little bit of I feel like it's almost there's a negative for me in my experience, and especially as an artist, like somebody who like identifies as an artist, I feel like it has like a negative backlash on like our progression that we're trying to move towards. Like there's like like we're hyper focusing on race, and as the token white kid, and also I have like like, I'm from Buffalo, New York, and there's a huge immigration, like huge immigration city here. We have all different people from all different lands here. It's just not Black people, it's just all different people from all different lands. It's just not Black people. And I feel like we're just hyper focusing on Black people at this point. And I feel like it's just kind of like putting all this pressure on the Black culture. And I feel like there's just this heavy, heavy weight on the Black culture. And it's just like putting all this pressure on them. And like, as like a member of the community, I'm just like, how do you feel about that? Because like, as like a friend or a member, I'm just like, yo, isn't that just like too much? Like, isn't it too much? Like for me, I feel like it's a little bit much to where it's just like, can we just chill a little bit on that? Because like, it's just a little bit heavy because yes, it's like good to be progressive and like, but I feel like it's a little bit why things are just like so charged because everything's so hyper focused on like Black, white, Black, white, Black, white, Black, white. But we have all of these different races in our community, Yeah. Can't we just like be multicultural?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hear Akil's response. Yeah. Thanks.
So a few things with that. So I'm assuming by inner city you mean Buffalo. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in broke neighborhood, violence, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting into it, right? But with that being said, there's a lot of ways that we can take this conversation or engage with this for a lot of stuff in terms of what you call hyper focus and pressure, right? When I took the train, going to school, or I had to take the bus going home, and I watched who got off what buses to go to what neighborhoods or to go to what aspects, and I had to look to see, like, I had to ask my mom, why didn't we get off at the stops with the nice houses or the nice, city pressures and things like that. I had to learn very quickly that whether or not you pay attention to or put focus on race in a lot of these cases, it's still happening, right? There's still redlining, there's still segregation, there's still all of these things that are happening. It's just a lot of people just didn't have to pay attention to it in the past, right? And the thing is, but Black individuals always had to pay attention. We always had to be hyper aware of what neighborhoods we were allowed in, what cities that we can go to without danger. And
You say like, Black people, but we all have to. Of course,
this is not specific to the fact that we have to pay attention or understand where we go to is not specific to Black people, but there are specific places that are specific to Black people, right? Me walking around Beverly Hills is a very different experience than me walking around Brooklyn, New York, or East Flatbush in many of these cases, as it would be for you. But the repercussions of such are also very different. If a white woman walks around a Black neighborhood, there's a fear to not engage with that individual because that might end up with you being arrested. if I walk around a white neighborhood, there's no fear of me in any of these. I mean, well, they fear me as a body or as a prospect, but I can be killed. There are things, right? I'm likely to be arrested, as you know, has happened in terms of growing up in Bloomberg stop and frisk era and being thrown against the wall for markers for an art project. But yeah, no. If to engage with you critically, right? I do think that there is some truth to the fact that there are other stories to be told that sometimes don't make the prevalence of just the way the sort of media rocket works in terms of this sort of black-white relations. But again, in a country that has been built on whiteness and blackness as its foil of who is and is not human, that's going to happen. And unfortunately, in terms of the history of racialization in this country, it has been falling along a black line radically. And for individuals who get closer to whiteness or who can pass or have proximity to whiteness, then get benefits from that. And this is why you see so many individuals who are in fact black that come from Latin America or from other parts of the world who do not want to be associated with blackness because you understand because you understand that being black in America is not a fun experience. But there are other stories and things like that need engagement, and stories from Indigenous Americans and stories from Chinese Americans, from Asian Americans, from every other individuals that come out. And a lot of this is for the fact that Hollywood has a sort of focus, and the media has a sort of focus with all of the crimes and violence that happen to Black individuals. It's like, how can we placate to that sort of group of people that doesn't how do I put this, that isn't that will make us in a sense look better or look like we care. Unfortunately, because this is the truth of the matter, there's a lot of engagement in a lot of the cases, because I'm trying to take your argument not as a sort of all lives matter argument in the case, and I can just pull up the always the picture of just like, there's a burning house, but what about the other houses? But my house is burning right now. So I don't think it's a hyper focus. I think we're just being made to look at the problems that we've been ignoring for so much. And I hope that continues for every group of individual, and that everyone continues to get the sort of focus that they need in many of these cases, because intersectionality is a thing, and not everybody's Black, not everybody's white. And you're right, there should be some middle ground for these individuals, if that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just basing it off of my experience, and I've I just kind of come from where I am, and I'm a very all-encompassing type of personality. So it's hard for me to, I'm a very, just I see from my eyes, and so I appreciate your views, and so it's hard to see I totally support it. What you're saying, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Question.
Much.
We have other questions? It's interesting, just to follow up a little bit, Akil, if you want to talk a little bit about this, the whole conception for you of the idea of how does it feel to be a problem? Yeah. Right. That this whole idea of that, how does one inhabit a category, right? And of a positioning that comes from a kind of generalized positioning, right? Do you want to talk about that, or should we see if some people have other questions?
I'm happy to see if other people want to think, but you're 100% right? That is the sort of question of like, isn't it too much? Isn't there too much focus? XYZ happening is literally the how does it feel to be a problem question, being asked again. And in many cases, it's, how do I put this? I think Kashona Gray had a great quote where it's like, I'm not the problem. The problem is the sort of society that creates the issues and aspects around it. The sort of hyper focus on Blackness is not even, it's a sort of racial reckoning or societal reckoning of the reality that for hundreds of years Black individuals have been in an awful position in this case, and it's consistently going to happen again, because lots of individuals ride the sort of freedom movements of Black individuals to get their own rights, whether or not it be queer rights whether or not it be women's rights, Stonewall's XYZ. For a lot of the cases, Black leadership and pushing in this country, because again, country sort of runs on a bottom. It is a capitalist country that runs on a bottom rung of race. That race being Black. This country wouldn't exist without the labor of slaves, XYZ. Yeah, it's you create the society, you create the problem. It's going to be messy when you try to clean it, right? And it's not going to be fun to engage. But Brandon, sorry. Do you want to ask that, or should I just engage?
It's just me mentioning that since we were talking about fighting games, just an event I'm running this weekend. If anyone in the class would be interested to join that, it's not just a little follow-up thing. Thanks.
I would 100% recommend that. Go play some games. Guilty Gear is fun.
It's in all the information is in the chat for those of you who aren't looking at the chat right now.
But this is a line of thinking that might be powerful in terms of engagement, or if anybody just wants to go back to video games or aspects or other things like that. But I guess I can ask, how does the class feel then about some of the discussion that has been going on? I did see Ray Emma mark something. Not going to put you on the spot there if you wanted to jump in or whatnot, but I am curious and happy to oblige in this conversation. Always got to be comfortable with the silence with students. Right. Like, I'm just going to stare. Daggers.
Well, maybe this is a moment to ask the question about the importance of thinking about community and the construction of community, and community that's not built on all the same experience, right? Where do we, and also the idea that actually we're in an online, this is a platform right now that we, how we engage with each other now from, in conversation or in reaction to each other. This is a class. It's already an existing framework, right? We're already in an institution, which is UB and the Department of Media Study. And this is a class that you've all chosen to take, and then for guests chosen to watch this discussion. But that question about how important it is to be thinking about not just the content, right? Even though the content's important, right? But this idea about how do we build communities or connections between people? And then how do these kinds of experiences or institutions that precede us, right? And categories that precede us shape how we can interact and understand each other, right?
I do think, so there's one there that asked about my experiences of racism in gaming community. I'll get to that in a second. We all got to live on the planet together some way, somehow, in a lot of these cases. And yeah, community differences are going to be a thing. And it's going to be important for individuals to learn about individuals, differences, aspects, things like that, in order to have some sort of intersectional relationship that is not parasitic or problematic in many of these cases. And sometimes that might look like, forms of equity. Sometimes that might be creating spaces for individuals to learn, or learning first before they engage with these communities. Because a lot of times individuals say, hey, we just can, work together, but then they realize that the world doesn't work the same for everyone. And then power imbalances, start to skew in the spaces that have, for individuals that have always had it. In many of those cases, I also would, I think, caution individuals to understand that while I have discussed the sort of racial applications of Blackness and whiteness, that multiple coalitions have existed in the past, whether or not it be through Black and Black slaves and indigenous lands, or Black and Asian individuals in the 70s, or even like Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition, right? A coalition of workers during the Black Panther era. These things have existed, they're often destroyed by policy and government and many of these other things. And this isn't me to, I'm not going to start on a conspiracy theory or anything else like that, but there's a wonderful question to be asked of who gains or who benefits from the discord and the sort of disillusion of coalitions and groups working together in a lot of these cases, and understand that, yeah, you can love thy neighbor and be 100%, but then be fully aware that there are differences in the sort of relationship that go on. And I don't know why I'm naming biblical stuff when I'm not, but I guess I'll move on to Abraham's question. Abraham, did you want to ask it yourself if you wanted to hop on and, I don't know, get your credit in any case, or should I just read it for you?
You can read it for me.
All right. What are your experiences of racism in the gaming community and how have you dealt with it? I mean, there's a lot. I've played video games literally all my life. If we're talking about just community engagement, I have joined wonderful spaces that I've made great friends and have some good stuff. But yeah, no, it is not uncommon to play a game and have someone tell me that I smell like the N-word or XYZ, but like, bro, how are you even sniffing me through a camera? Or, rely on any, the big N word, the big N key on their keyboard. I'm sure they have, saved for special occasions of when they're losing matches or when they realize that I'm using some form of Black English in many of these cases. And typically the way I deal with it is by beating the individuals. Hopefully that's usually a case. It's a real shitty thing when the racist is better than you. You're like, damn, what do I do now? Or work through specific forms of resistance and things like that. So, it wouldn't be uncommon for individuals that I played with when they had a teammate that was just like super hella racist. They're like, you're this, you're blah, 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 XYZ, go back to Africa, blah, 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 to throw the match. If you're playing ranked and you need that last player, if you're going to be racist, then why should I have to play with you? And the issue with that is that game companies have not caught up to these social forms of active resistance. So you'll be more penalized for quitting a match or stopping to play a match than the individual that's actually being racist in a lot of these cases, especially if it's like something like Overwatch, where up until recently Blizzard hasn't been recording, so you can scream the N-word as much as you want and say all these messed up things, and then if I quit the game, I'm the one who's penalized for 4 matches or whatever it is. But there's a lot of different ways that they handle it. Sometimes I just ignore it. You sort of get accustomed to it. It's just, sometimes you just can't play video games if you don't have a thick skin to it, unfortunately. Other times it's to make them feel stupid. Other times it's just to beat them and continuously beating them until they quit the game. And hopefully I make them quit forever, because on some games you can follow people around and PK them, and I will do it. I'll keep it up. I'll be petty if necessary, if that helps out. But yeah, there's another one. Oh, Brandon again. Sorry. Developers and recent years devoted more attention to reading online. Racism, intolerance from players, and reporting resources have the blowback and meaning, or they'll think twice in engaging in that behavior. Yes, game developers have done a lot more, especially in terms of online games, to engage with their report systems, how they deal with racism and things like that. Unfortunately, people are smarter than the majority of systems that they put out there, and where there's a will, there's a way. The easiest example is of like, if you have a chat, if you have a chat system that like blocks all the bad words, if I put an exclamation mark instead of an I in the word nigger, I'm still going to read it. So I have the human understanding of what it is you're attempting to type to me. It's better now that I can screenshot it and you may be banned, but that often goes behind an invisible wall in a lot of these cases where you don't know what happened to that individual, if anything was ever done, and by then the damage is already done. So and you get an account banned, you can make another one, depends on the game. But I support game companies doing this and getting better at it, but still not perfect in a lot of these cases. But yeah.
Akil, would you say that actually going into being a scholar of games, of a media ethnographer, is also part of how you have responded to racism in gaming?
Oh, definitely. I write it down. I just take notes every time now. Sometimes I gotta remind myself that what's the cleanest way to say this? I ain't a bitch, but and do something about it. But it's immediately met with fascination at first. Mostly because it's like, A, why are you doing this? And B, this now gets to get put into the dissertation because this experience is now data collection. I get to, goat people on or engage. Well, typically not goat on, but it's like, why? Why are you saying that? I've had conversations with full-on racists sometimes that actually attempted to break down why it is they were using the language that they were using, and sometimes have a small epiphany of how stupid it is, but it's typically just ends in, language is language. I'm on the internet. You can't do anything about it. So I'm going to say whatever I want. If you play like an N-word, I'm going to say that you play like an N-word. What does playing like an N-word mean? I don't know. Why am I still saying N-word when I'm Black and I can freely use it? Who knows? But it's always a curious sort of interaction just because it's all data. When you are then ethnographer, you are the primary source of data collection. You are the instrument of research. So your experiences do play a role in how the data gets coded, written out, and sort of classified later on. Yeah, most people think twice. They'll just do whatever they want, right? It's for them. It's like I said, with like the T-Pain example, it's a form of play, right? Getting to engage and using the word and using other forms of racism is how they make their fun. They'll log in to be as racist as possible. During the Black Lives Matter protests, there was a lot of people that would just get on and scream like whatever they want, be like, hey guys, let's go burn down cars or XYZ without ever getting into the actual politics or dynamics of what the protest was, who was doing what and where it was. But it's again just to mess with people. It's just for fun. Kunling, did you want to speak up, Kunling, or forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that, or should I read, engage?
Hi. So I just want to comment on the video games because I play those games too.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I can see how the people behaviors or typing out those really bad words.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes it's really, really bad. And I think those players are just finding ways to be superior in the games and just finding confidence in the games. So they sing really bad to other people and to make them their self happy. But I think it's glad and interesting to see these games or esports industry trying to incorporate with different ways like the legends. Different I play many games such as League of Legends or Apex Legends, and they are updating many legends like different races, Asia, Black, or something else. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's making all the races people together and not like racist discrimination each other or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I applaud you. I'm absolute dog water at Apex Legends. I'm also curious who you play in League, but you're 100% right. Sometimes it is a sort of engagement or attempt to feel superior in some of these cases. Also depends on like what region or example that you're playing in. Sometimes the sort of racial interactions you have in a US server might be different from a Brazilian one. But it's also great to see a lot of these companies. So League of Legends is always one that I like to talk about, for that is basically a game that has hundreds of champions for a very long time. Didn't have Black champions, and then you have the introduction of Lucian in like 2015, sometime around there. And Lucian was met with a lot of racism and vitriol. Lucian stole my bike. Lucian's doing a drive-by. Lucian has guns. XYZ, Lucian from the hood, all of the sort of stereotypical play around Lucian. But League of Legends had continued But in terms of character design on the company's part, Lucian is a great design character with a great sense of lore. And then you have Echo, and then Rena, Riot. Why am I'm dropping the name there, and then Senna, and now Kisante and other individuals like that. League of Legends has a wonderful diversity team, both within Rainbow Riot and Riot Noir, who sort of help not only fix or help create more realistic Black and queer characters, but help write realistic stories, help design characters in a way that is going to look and be received a lot better by a Black audience. So they've been doing a wonderful job at incorporating these champions. The player base has started to move a little bit more around, but League's player base is always going to be toxic. League is toxic. It is what it is. I've been playing it for literally over a decade. Haven't stopped. Won't stop. I played a match yesterday, but that game I'm actually not bad at. But yeah, it is. There's tons of reasons for why somebody would engage in race play, either for fun or in terms of superiority, in terms of because they're getting destroyed or they're upset, and that's just the first word that they can run to, which says a lot about the person. That's the other one. Well, wonderful isn't the right word. So, Gabriel, do you want to say this? I keep asking people because I don't know how credit works in your class. I'm trying to help you out. Nope. Okay. So Gabriel was playing a game of League of Legends. I was playing Kisante. Kisante is a Afro-Black character who was basically based in what is like fictional Africa or African culture in the game League of Legends. And they were playing, they were winning, and they started to be called slurs. There's a wonderfully interesting thing about playing games with champs or games like MOBAs or Apex Legends and things like that, is that characters begin to carry their own sort of culture and legacy around with them. And this can influence the sort of interactions that you have with other individuals. In games like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft, you might create a character that looks like you or might be, open you up to other forms of discrimination. But like I said, Lucian, if you were playing Lucian, somebody was going to accuse you of stealing their bike. Like, please don't steal my bike, XYZ. And Kisante, when you play a Black character in League of Legends, it sort of hyper focuses the slurs and things that you can be called. Just like if you were playing somebody like Yasuo, who is from the what is essentially the fictional Asian region, Ionia. In that case, that might open you up to be called Asian slurs or any of these other aspects. But yeah, it's happened to me playing Kisante or Lucian or many of these other things. So it's gonna happen. It's one of those like deterrents to playing Black characters, because like, damn, you're gonna call me this and I am Black and I'm gonna be annoyed.
I had a question.
Of course.
As like a 10-year-old kid who played a lot of Modern Warfare 2 on Xbox Live.
Yeah.
I wasn't really like prepared for like the amount of like racist and like mature like conversations that like would be happening. It was really wild, and I was just wondering how you felt that, how you thought like it could like affect a child's mind and their ideas.
In lots of ways. For one, Call of Duty is a rated M for game. Turn it off. Go give it back to GameStop. I'm kidding. I definitely played when I was. I mean, for like my age, it was like Mortal Kombat and Grand Theft Auto. Like, wow, it's not the craziest. Let me play. I mean, the difference though, in terms of like those chat lobbies and spaces like that, is that it's building up a culture, right? So there is a sort of pseudo-racist culture that is the sort of at the underneath of US culture, and that gets expressed within video games, not just, like games just don't start off racist, right? They're like this is being brought in from the physical space into these spaces. And when you have a demographic that thinks this way and continuously uses these words and continues such, it's not very difficult to become acculturated into thinking that some of this language and interactions with people is okay. And it's not just in terms of racism, but also in terms of the hyper masculinity, the hyper voided out rage aspects of it, that you learn to express not only parts of as parts of your identity, but as forms of emic behavior, and that you are behaving this way as it allows you to be accepted by your peers, right? It is your cultural in to act this out, and it only perpetuates this sort of cycle, because if you needed to act like this, you're going to expect other people to act like this, and they'll act like that, and this things will continue, which is why people get so upset and so crazy. It's like, I've been doing this for so long, it's been my way of life for absolutely so long. Who are you to come and tell me that I can't be racist or misogynist or whatever else, or I'm just playing, or I didn't mean it, or who gives a fuck, I'm just online, XYZ. So the worry then is that kids then find it acceptable in a lot of these other cases. But same thing I tell every parent is that you have to have these conversations with kids early, because if you don't, the internet is going to happen is going to have it for you. And be prepared, because whether or not they go to a friend's house or any of these other places, they're going to find it. They're going to have engagement with it, and you kind of need to be prepared for it, because a lot of the places that I experienced, like being called a slur and all these other things before, the NYPD, grabbed me up, or people accused me from stealing in stores that I was just waiting in for my mom for, or whatever else. It was online. It was in video games that, like, a lot of my first, racist interactions was just like, that's what they're talking about. Got it. Either way, but yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Ronnie, and I may have missed this because I stepped away to the bathroom. But how did you ever respond to that directly? Like, if you encounter someone using slurs at you, because me, from my experience, I'll usually just laugh at it and call them corny, because
yeah,
hiding behind a screen and want to say all this. So I just want to know your reaction to it, in response.
Yeah, nah. So we did talk about this a little bit more, so I won't reiterate too heavily. There's lots of different ways, lots of different people will react differently, and sometimes it's that. Sometimes I'm in a worse mood, and I may be inclined to find some sort of fallacy within their argument and whatnot. But most of the time, racists aren't they're not engaging with you because they are the intellectual type. It is the best that they wanted to do. Sometimes it's sort of acts of fugitivity and refusal, where it's like, all right, cool, I'm an N-word. I guess N-words can't, push the mid lane. So I'm just gonna, sit in the jungle, fight in red for however long until, the match ends. Or if it's just ignoring the person. Hopefully they're on the other team, because it's always a little bit of an extra sting when they're on your team. And it's like, if I play, I'm now helping this idiot. But it's a lot of it is just laughing it off and having that sort of thick skin and just not engaging with it. Sometimes it's just ruining their day however you can. As I was telling the class before, I will, if I'm playing an MMO or other things like that, I will do my best to make them log off the game or quit the game or switch servers or hopefully put the game down forever. If I can keep killing them, if I can, chase them around. I remember, it was a game I was playing. I can't remember if it was Call of Duty or whatever else. And I am again dog water at Call of Duty and a lot of these FPS games. But I remember somebody was going off with racial slurs, and I made it my only mission to run after them and kill them so that they could not have fun in playing the game. It didn't matter if I died. It didn't matter if I ran through grenades or got stabbed or whatever else. I would have run through people, shoot, stab, do whatever I can. And hearing the guy rage and yell for a very long time was absolute music to my ears. So stuff like that.
Yeah, same. If I had encountered someone, I would make it a mission to make their game tougher. So yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, if you saw the T-Pain video, or you want to look it up afterwards, when they came into the lobby, calling the N-word and talking hot shit, T-Pain and his boys made it a mission to destroy them, and they didn't have much to say after that. So as T-Pain put it, ladies and gentlemen, the niggers win. We did it. We got them, boys. Either way. Last of Us conversations. What are people naming here?
What I have asked everybody to do was to put the name of their favorite game and sign in as the kind of attendance. Nice. And so I'm just giving a kind of framework. And so when I say game, I mean app, video game, I mean sport, I mean, and also I said your favorite game to play or watch. So I thought it would be a nice way to kind of get a sense of who is here, who plays. But it was also just a way to get them to students to get attendance. But it's a there are other questions anyone want to talk about, ask any questions?
My favorite video games are Call of Duty and like Bethesda games like Fallout and Skyrim, but I was wondering, what is your favorite video game?
That's a great question.
Sorry, what is my what?
Favorite game?
What is your favorite video game?
That's always a hard question and list to sort of, get around. I grew up with a lot of Nintendo. My favorite game series is probably Zelda. Very excited for Breath of the Wild 2. Things like that. I guess I have to add League of Legends up there because I've played it for so long for the competitive aspect. I love Smash Bros. Great stuff. Greninja main, if that helps. But I tend to be more for, if it's not a competitive game, I tend to look at more adventure and puzzle solving games. I tend to be a coward, so horror games usually takes me a while to play or work my way up to, but Last of Us 1 and 2 were great. Although there's some troubling racial politics that I like to teach with in that game, which is always fun. Then there is another one of my favorite games is like in my top 5 is Sekiro. It's the one Soulsborne game that I think is absolutely fantastic and has basically made it so that I can't play any other game without the hardest difficulty. So I just got through God of War Ragnarok, which was fantastic. And I had to play that on God of War mode because I was like, if I don't die at least 7 times to this boss, then it ain't fun. Oh my God, I took so long fighting. So Lady Butterfly is usually the second or third boss you're supposed to get into, but when they gave me the option to go back in time, I ended up going to her first, and I maybe spent a day just dying consistently to her until I finally, she was the boss that made me good at that game, and after her, everything else was easy until I got to Owl, and then I was like, all right, 48 hours, I'm gonna drink some coffee, I'm gonna look at the screen, I'm just gonna die again and again and again until I get good. I don't care, it's happening.
All right, I have a question. So yeah, for better or for worse, I've been on the internet for 14, 15 years now. And, I kind of grew up, I guess, desensitized to everything because that's just the way it always was the video game community doesn't care who you are. You're going to get blasted pretty much. And I understand the need to kind of section ourselves off into, I'm in South Asian video game communities and all that. What do you think? Well, one, my first question is, do you think the video game community can shape up and can we all come together to be better? And two, how do you think we could do that?
So a lot of the work to do that is happening currently, and I feel like things are getting better. But like I said, the internet is a very echo chambery place. So once you sort of find your communities, it gets exceedingly difficult to get out of them. But it is, I think the pandemic has also been very good at that, is that realizing that often there's been sort of that digital physical divide where it's what I do online doesn't matter. And now we were stuck in our houses for 2 years, and everybody realized that our online identities and personas do in fact matter, even if you can hide behind them. But there's all this work and research about how people express, various aspects of their true selves through avatars, through other things like that. So games and online spaces do very much matter to people. So a lot of it is the sort of community work that goes on, the creating these sort of safe pockets that allow people to, come up for air when they're engaging in incredibly, racist spaces and things like that. That sounds like you have your communities where it's it's getting a little hot. I'm gonna get off. I'm gonna go into that Discord. Maybe find people who want to play, who engage, who I can have meaningful relationships with in a lot of these cases. And the other one is for companies to sort of be held accountable for some of the actions and roles that they have playing with it within this. Games like World of Warcraft, super fun game, loved it as a kid. But then when you have almost every aspect of ethnic culture in your game expressed in what are literally monsters, and other aspects of which is often stereotyped or racialized aspects to create an essence of play, like the trolls giving off an essence of voodoo mysticism by, you know, using Haitian voodoo and Jamaican, Jamaican accents, because nobody knows where Haiti is or what Haitian people sound like. You're sort of opening up your player base to be okay with that sort of play in a lot of cases, and they're definitely right. There are ways to do it correctly, but Blizzard has done their best. Obviously, all the allegations has shown that they have a lot of places and places to grow in a lot of these cases. But I think the video game community has as much of a opportunity to correct or better themselves or be a healthier place as any place in, you know, the US, as a lot of the cultures that are performed are, of course, you know, sort of hyper specified or sort of grown into these weird little hodgepodges of, you know, alt-right or these weird sort of like terrorist actions or XYZ. But it's all taking in a culture from somewhere else. And if, unfortunately, a lot of the cleaning up in video games is also just cleaning up in like US rhetoric and a lot of these other places that influence these spaces. So I am hopeful. I'm trying not to be a pessimist about it in a lot of these cases, but yeah, it's I think as people become more understanding and engaged, I'm definitely not one of those people that think racism goes away with generations, because it doesn't. There's always somebody to teach it. But I do think games offer a great opportunity to engage with one another in ways that we may not have done so physically. So yeah.
That's great. I think that's a really actually great way to end. Talking about the prospects of gaming and of change and transformation in the face of institutional, and structural racism, and it's what we've seen this last week. We can see how it's still alive and well in the United States and needs resistance, and is being resisted by communities and movements, online and offline, in state houses and other places too. So, okay, thank you. Again, for those of you who are, thank you so much, Akil. This was fantastic. And thank you for your work. And thanks for the questions and conversation from students. And if you haven't already, please, if you're a student, please post your full name and your favorite game into the chat in order to get credit for having attended. And we'll stay online until for another 4 minutes, just so that if you haven't posted in the chat, you can. So thanks, everyone. And thank you, especially Akil.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it again. And for those of you who thought this was fun, I'm happy you felt that way. Super glad I was interesting and not, putting people to sleep. So great to meet all of you. Enjoy your games. Be great people. I believe in you.
Great. Thank you, Akil, and good luck finishing everything. And we'll be in touch.
Of course.
And the students will be writing 500-word responses to your talk and your research. So we'll send you the all the responses.
Beautiful. Okay.
Great. Okay. Have a good night.
For me right now. All right. Have a good night.
Yep.
Thank you, Akil.
Of course. Happy to. All right. I'm going to leave now.
Yeah. Go. Have a good dinner.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Sure. Yep. Just waiting for everyone to post.